What would you do if in the middle of a classroom filled with laughter, your teacher publicly called you a liar for sharing the truth about your father's job? Jaden Collins, a 10-year-old boy, faced this very humiliation when Mrs. Blake dismissed his pride in having an FBI agent as a dad. As the class erupted in mocking laughter, Jaden felt the weight of prejudice crashing down on him. But the tides were about to turn when his father unexpectedly walked into the room, ready to reveal the truth that would shatter their misconceptions. Stay tuned to witness how one moment can change everything. As the Collins family stood on the sidewalk, gazing up at their newly renovated home, a sense of anticipation filled the air. Jaden Collins, a 10-year-old boy, was excited yet anxious about the new chapter that awaited them. His father, an FBI agent, had taken on this job with pride, knowing it came with the challenges of frequent relocations. Jaden felt a mixture of hope and apprehension as he noticed the curious yet indifferent glances from the neighbors, who seemed to watch them with a mix of intrigue and unease. A middle-aged woman across the street paused her gardening to scrutinize Jaden and his family, her sunglasses shielding her expression. She glanced at Jaden for a moment longer than necessary before returning her attention to her plants, as if nothing had happened. The fleeting interest from other neighbors was similarly dismissive as they peered from behind their curtains before retreating inside, leaving Jaden with a palpable sense of coldness that enveloped him like a thick fog. This move felt different from previous ones. He sensed a weight of judgment hanging in the air, deepening his unease. "Are you okay, Jaden?" his mother asked gently, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Jaden forced a smile, nodding slightly, though inside he felt turmoil brewing. "Yes, Mom." His father, Mr. Collins, looked at him with a blend of softness and firmness. "I know this is different from before, but we are a family, and we will always stick together, right?" Jaden nodded again, his eyes betraying the worry he tried to hide. As they entered the house, which still held the faint smell of fresh paint, mingled with the citrus scent of the cleaner his mother had used, Jaden felt the emptiness within its walls. It amplified the loneliness settling in his heart. Climbing the stairs, he chose a small room with a window that offered a view of the pale blue sky beyond. Sitting by the window, he pondered whether this new life would truly offer him a welcoming place, or if he would remain just another stranger in a sea of curious, prying eyes. The next morning dawned with the same gray clouds overhead, as if the sky mirrored Jaden's trepidation. From his bedroom window, he watched the familiar yellow school bus come to a stop at the end of the street, the sound of children's laughter drifting up to him like a distant echo. His mother gently adjusted his white shirt, her gaze filled with concern, yet softened with reassurance. "Don't worry, sweetie. It'll be okay. Just be yourself." Jaden tried to smile, but as he stepped onto the bus, dozens of eyes turned to him, and an eerie silence fell over the cramped space. As he walked down the aisle to an empty seat at the back, he felt the weight of scrutiny on him. When Jaden arrived at Willow Creek Elementary, the simple red brick building stood stark against the gray sky, a symbol of the new life he was about to navigate. Inside the classroom, Mrs. Blake, his homeroom teacher, greeted him with an air of indifference as she introduced him to the class. "This is Jaden Collins, a new student from Washington, D.C. Let's help him get settled." Her tone felt dismissive, as if welcoming him was merely a chore to complete. Jaden stood awkwardly at the front of the class, feeling exposed and vulnerable amidst a sea of cold, indifferent faces. He raised his hand in a friendly wave, but no one reciprocated. "You can sit next to Colin," Mrs. Blake said, pointing to an empty seat next to a tall blond boy who leaned back in his chair, arms crossed and eyes filled with a mix of arrogance and disdain. "Thanks," Jaden murmured, but Colin barely acknowledged him, a frustrated sigh escaping his lips instead. As the class dragged on, each minute felt like an eternity. Whenever Jaden attempted to participate, Mrs. Blake ignored him, pretending not to see his raised hand. Even when he answered a history question correctly, she offered him nothing more than a cold nod. Lunchtime brought even greater difficulties. Jaden walked through the cafeteria, searching for a place to sit, but each time he approached a table, wary eyes turned toward him, and whispers filled the air. Eventually, he found a lonely corner where he could sit by himself, the sandwich his mother had made feeling tasteless and dull. Colin and his friends laughed and chatted at a nearby table, occasionally glancing over at Jaden, their whispers igniting bursts of laughter. Each mocking glance from Colin confirmed what Jaden feared most. He would never fit in here. Exhausted and filled with disappointment, he returned home that afternoon, weary from the weight of exclusion. When his mother asked how his day went, Jaden replied tersely, "It's fine," knowing she understood it was a lie, but he was not yet ready to share his feelings of loneliness. That night, as he lay in bed with a dim moonlight filtering through the window, Jaden grappled with the question of why he felt invisible to everyone. He wondered if tomorrow might bring any relief from the isolation that had begun to seep into his soul. The days that followed were draped in a dull haze of loneliness, yet amidst this darkness, a glimmer of hope began to emerge. One morning, Mrs. Blake announced a forthcoming event. Next Friday will be Career Day. Each student needs to prepare a short presentation about their parents' jobs. This is an opportunity for you all to show your pride in your families. While the class erupted in excitement, Jaden remained silent, his heart racing at the thought of sharing his father's incredible work. For the first time since moving, he felt a flicker of anticipation. That evening, he found an old photo of his father, dressed in a formal black suit with the FBI badge gleaming beside him, both of them smiling brightly. "I'm going to show them how amazing my dad is," Jaden murmured, placing the photo carefully on his desk. As the days passed, Jaden's excitement for Career Day grew, but so did the shadows of doubt that lingered in the back of his mind. He dedicated every afternoon to perfecting his presentation, meticulously rewriting his notes and practicing his delivery in front of the mirror. He envisioned the moment when he would stand before his classmates and share the truth about his father's important work as an FBI agent. Each night, he felt a swell of pride, convinced that once his peers learned the truth, they would finally see him differently. However, the day before the event, as Jaden reviewed his notes during recess, Colin and a few of his friends approached him, their faces twisted in mockery. "Jaden, what are you going to say your dad does for a living tomorrow?" Colin asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Jaden hesitated for a moment, feeling the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. But summoning his courage, he met Colin's gaze and replied, "My dad is an FBI agent." Colin erupted into laughter, joined by his friends as they mocked him. "FBI? This is Ohio, not Hollywood. Do you think we're in kindergarten or something?" The laughter rang in Jaden's ears like sharp needles, and although he said nothing further, a burning determination ignited within him. He clenched his fists, vowing that tomorrow would be different. That night, with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness, Jaden laid out the small suit his mother had prepared for him, smoothing out each wrinkle with care. He placed the photo and his father's FBI badge beside it, feeling a sense of purpose wash over him. For the first time in days, he fell asleep with hope in his heart, unaware of the greater challenges that awaited him. The morning dawned gray and familiar, yet Jaden felt a surge of excitement coursing through him as he dressed in his suit. He adjusted his tie and took a deep breath, looking in the mirror, reminding himself that he would soon share his pride with the entire class. When he boarded the crowded yellow bus, he no longer kept his head down. Instead, he gripped his backpack tightly, a sense of purpose radiating from within. The morning flew by, and one by one, students stood to share about their parents' jobs. Emma introduced her mother, a dentist, and Trevor spoke enthusiastically about his dad, a construction engineer. When it was Colin's turn, he stood tall, his voice booming with confidence. "My dad is the most famous football coach in town. He led the school team to win several championships." The class erupted in applause, and Mrs. Blake beamed with pride. Finally, it was Jaden's moment. Heart racing, he stood up, walking to the front of the classroom with determination. Jaden opened his bag, carefully retrieving the photo of his dad and the FBI badge, placing them on Mrs. Blake's desk. He took a deep breath, ready to share the truth he had been holding on to for so long. "My dad is an FBI agent." But instead of the expected support, the classroom erupted with laughter. Jaden's heart raced as his face drained of color, shock, and fear coursing through him. Even Colin laughed loudly, the sound slicing into Jaden's heart like a dagger. Mrs. Blake's stern expression morphed into one of disapproval as she interrupted him. Jaden, today we need to hear the truth, not some Hollywood action movie. Stop making up stories to get attention. Crushed, Jaden felt as if the ground had been pulled from beneath his feet. He tried to explain, his voice trembling as he stammered. But ma'am, my dad really is. That's enough, Mrs. Blake snapped, her voice sharp and filled with irritation. You should sit down and rethink your attitude. The laughter continued to echo around him, fading slowly but never truly stopping. Jaden searched the room for a sympathetic glance, but all he found were cold stares and mocking eyes that pierced through him like arrows. Defeated, he walked back to his seat, trembling hands clutching the photo and badge to his chest. What had once been symbols of pride now felt cold and meaningless. The rest of the lesson blurred into a cacophony of noise as Jaden's mind spiraled with bitter questions. Why didn't they believe him? Why did even the teacher think he was lying? When the bell rang, signaling the end of class, Jaden sat motionless, a fragile statue in the chaos around him. As his classmates filed out, Colin lingered at the door, throwing a smirk in Jaden's direction. FBI agent, huh? Who do you think will believe such a crazy story? His words stung, and Jaden lowered his head, allowing the weight of loneliness and bitterness to consume him. In the following days, the world around Jaden transformed into a cold shade of gray. Each morning, he stepped off the bus, head bowed to evade the disdainful glances and cruel whispers that followed him. No matter how hard he tried to ignore them, the words always found their way to his ears, sharp reminders of his isolation. Look, it's the FBI boy. Colin's voice rang out mockingly, laughter erupting from his friends. Each time it happened, Jaden gripped the straps of his backpack tightly, battling the tremor rising within him. He longed to defend himself, to shout that he wasn't lying, that his dad truly was an FBI agent. But every time he mustered the courage to look up, he was met with cold, doubtful glares that left him feeling even more powerless. In class, Mrs. Blake grew increasingly indifferent, no longer calling on Jaden or acknowledging his eager hand raised high. Sometimes he caught a glimpse of her disdainful gaze, as if he were merely a nuisance she wished to ignore. Lunchtime became a daily reminder of his isolation, filled with cautious stares and hushed whispers that followed him wherever he went. Jaden chose a distant table, far from the laughter and chatter, where he sat alone with his tasteless sandwich, feeling invisible. One day, as Jaden opened his locker to retrieve his books, a crumpled piece of paper fell to the floor. Scrawled across it were the words, "FBI boy, why don't you just call your dad to come arrest us?" Jaden crumpled the paper in his hand, his throat tightening as tears threatened to spill. He wondered who could hate him so much and why the truth about his dad was so hard for them to accept. From that moment on, Jaden withdrew further into himself, retreating into a world of isolation even at home, where he spoke less and less to his parents. The pride he once had for his father morphed into fear and shame, leaving him too afraid to mention his father's job again. One weekend, when Mr. Collins returned from a business trip, he found Jaden sitting alone by the window, staring out at the empty sky. Concern etched on his face. He approached his son and gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Son, how's everything at school?" Jaden flinched, avoiding his father's caring gaze. He bit his lip, trying to suppress the tears that threatened to spill. "It's fine. Everything's fine." But Mr. Collins, familiar with the signs of his son's hurt, remained silent, searching for answers in Jaden's eyes. "If something's wrong, I'm always here to listen. You know that, right?" Jaden nodded, but didn't respond. He wanted to open up, to tell his father everything, but the fear of being hurt again held him back, leaving him to retreat silently to his room, leaving his father behind, worry and regret etched across his face. As the days rolled on, Jaden clung to the hope that career day would change everything. He poured his heart into perfecting his presentation, eager to share the truth about his father's esteemed position as an FBI agent. He meticulously crafted each sentence, determined to impress his classmates and finally earn their respect. However, the shadows of doubt still loomed over him, fueled by the mocking laughter he had endured from Colin and his friends. The day before the big event, while Jaden practiced in a quiet corner of the playground, Colin and a few of his friends approached, their expressions filled with derision. "So, Jaden, what's your big story about your dad tomorrow?" Colin taunted, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Jaden hesitated for a moment, feeling the familiar knot of anxiety in his stomach. But he took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and replied defiantly, "My dad is an FBI agent." Colin burst out laughing, joined by his friends, who echoed his mockery. "Right, an FBI agent. What a joke. You really think we're going to believe that?" Their laughter rang in Jaden's ears, sharp and painful. Despite their jeers, a flame of determination ignited within him. He clenched his fists, reminding himself that tomorrow would be his chance to prove them all wrong. That night, Jaden carefully laid out his small suit, smoothing out every wrinkle as he prepared for the presentation. He placed the cherished photo of his father and the FBI badge on the table, his heart swelling with pride. For the first time in days, he fell asleep with a sense of hope, unaware of the more significant challenges that lay ahead. Morning arrived, shrouded in the usual gray sky, but today felt different. As Jaden dressed in his suit, a sense of excitement coursed through him. He adjusted his tie, took a deep breath, and looked into the mirror, reminding himself that he was about to share his pride with the world. When he boarded the yellow school bus, he no longer avoided eye contact. Instead, he sat tall, gripping his backpack tightly, feeling as if he were holding onto something monumental. The classroom buzzed with anticipation as students eagerly presented their parents' professions. Emma spoke proudly about her mother, a dentist, while Trevor shared his father's accomplishments as a construction engineer. When it was Colin's turn, he stood confidently, declaring, "My dad is the most famous football coach in town. He led our team to win several championships." Applause erupted, and Mrs. Blake smiled warmly, clearly impressed. Finally, it was Jaden's moment. Heart racing, he stood up and walked to the front of the classroom, determined to share the truth he had been holding on to for so long. He reached into his bag, carefully retrieving the photo of his dad alongside the FBI badge, placing them on Mrs. Blake's desk. Taking a deep breath, he began, "My dad is an FBI agent." But instead of the support he hoped for, the classroom erupted in laughter. Jaden's heart sank as shock and disbelief washed over him. Colin's laughter rang out the loudest, echoing in Jaden's ears like a cruel taunt. Mrs. Blake's expression shifted from indifference to judgment as she reprimanded him. "Jaden, we need to hear the truth today, not some Hollywood fantasy. Stop making up stories for attention." Crushed, Jaden felt as if the floor had vanished beneath him. He struggled to explain, his voice quaking as he stammered, "But ma'am, my dad really is." "Enough," Mrs. Blake interrupted sharply, her irritation palpable. "Sit down and rethink your attitude." The laughter continued to fill the room, each jeer piercing through Jaden's heart. He searched for a sympathetic glance among his classmates, but all he found were cold stares and mocking eyes that left him feeling utterly alone. Defeated, he returned to his seat, clutching the photo and badge to his chest as his hands trembled. What had once been symbols of pride now felt cold and hollow. The remainder of the lesson faded into a blur as Jaden's mind spiraled with bitter questions. Why didn't they believe him? Why didn't even the teacher think he was lying? When the bell rang, signaling the end of class, Jaden sat frozen at his desk, a fragile figure in the midst of chaos. His classmates filed out, laughter echoing down the hall, leaving him behind like a forgotten statue. At the doorway, Colin lingered, throwing a disdainful smirk Jaden's way. "So, FBI agent, huh? Who do you think will believe such a ridiculous story?" His words stung like a bee, and Jaden lowered his head, allowing the weight of loneliness and bitterness to consume him. In the days that followed, Jaden felt as if the world around him had turned a dismal shade of gray. Each morning, he disembarked from the bus, head bowed to evade the disdainful glances and cruel whispers that followed him like a shadow. No matter how hard he tried to tune them out, the The words always reached him, sharp reminders of his isolation. "Look, it's the FBI boy!" Colin's voice rang out, laughter erupting from his friends. Every time it happened, Jaden gripped the straps of his backpack tightly, battling the tremor rising within him. He longed to defend himself, to shout that he wasn't lying, that his dad truly was an FBI agent. But every time he mustered the courage to look up, he was met with cold, doubtful glares that left him feeling even more powerless. In class, Mrs. Blake grew increasingly indifferent, no longer calling on Jaden or acknowledging his eager hand raised high. He caught glimpses of her disdainful gaze, as if he were merely a nuisance she wished to ignore. Lunchtime became a daily reminder of his isolation, filled with cautious stares and hushed whispers that followed him wherever he went. Jaden chose a distant table, far from the laughter and chatter, where he sat alone with his tasteless sandwich, feeling invisible. One day, as Jaden opened his locker to retrieve his books, a crumpled piece of paper fell to the floor. Scrawled across it were the words, "FBI boy, why don't you just call your dad to come arrest us?" Jaden crumpled the paper in his hand, his throat tightening as tears threatened to spill. He wondered who could hate him so much and why the truth about his dad was so hard for them to accept. From that moment on, Jaden withdrew further into himself, retreating into a world of isolation, even at home, where he spoke less and less to his parents. The pride he once had for his father morphed into fear and shame, leaving him too afraid to mention his father's job again. One weekend, when Mr. Collins returned from a business trip, he found Jaden sitting alone by the window, staring out at the empty sky. Concern etched on his face. He approached his son and gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Son, how's everything at school?" Jaden flinched, avoiding his father's caring gaze. He bit his lip, trying to suppress the tears that threatened to spill. "It's fine. Everything's fine." But Mr. Collins, familiar with the signs of his son's hurt, remained silent, searching for answers in Jaden's eyes. "If something's wrong, I'm always here to listen. You know that, right?" Jaden nodded, but didn't respond. He wanted to open up, to tell his father everything, but the fear of being hurt again held him back, leaving him to retreat silently to his room, leaving his father behind, worry and regret etched across his face. As the days turned into a blur of loneliness and despair, Jaden struggled to find hope in the aftermath of career day. The laughter and mockery from his classmates echoed in his mind, each taunt a painful reminder of his isolation. But deep down, he knew he had to find a way to stand strong, to reclaim his pride and the truth about his father. One afternoon, Mr. Collins returned home from a business trip, his presence bringing a sense of comfort that Jaden had longed for. Seeing his son sitting quietly by the window, lost in thought, he approached with concern etched on his face. "Hey, buddy, how's everything at school?" he asked gently, placing a reassuring hand on Jaden's shoulder. Jaden flinched, avoiding his father's gaze. He felt a lump form in his throat, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. "It's fine. Everything's fine." Mr. Collins, however, knew his son too well to be fooled by the facade. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right?" Jaden nodded but remained silent, the weight of his worries pressing down on him. He wanted to share his pain, to tell his father about the humiliation he had faced, but the fear of disappointing him held him back. That evening, as Jaden lay in bed, he clutched the small FBI badge tightly in his hand, feeling its cool metal against his skin. Memories of his father in his uniform flooded his mind. The pride he felt when he learned about his dad's work, the excitement in his voice when he spoke about serving his country. But now, that pride felt overshadowed by the shame and doubt he faced at school. Why was it so hard for others to believe in his father's true identity? Meanwhile, Mr. Collins and Mrs. Collins sat together in the living room, discussing their son's struggles. "I can't believe they treated Jaden like that," Mr. Collins said, his voice low and filled with anger. "He doesn't deserve to be humiliated like that in front of his classmates." Mrs. Collins nodded, her eyes filled with concern for their son. "We need to do something about this. Jaden deserves to be treated with respect." Determined to protect their son, they decided to confront Mrs. Blake at the upcoming parent-teacher meeting. "I want her to understand that our son is not a liar," Mr. Collins stated firmly. This situation cannot just end without consequences. Mrs. Collins looked at him, admiration shining in her eyes. She knew he would do whatever it took to stand up for Jaden. The day of the meeting arrived, and the sky hung heavy with gray clouds, mirroring the tension in the air. Mr. Collins wore a sharp black suit, exuding confidence as they entered Willow Creek Elementary. As they walked through the halls, parents turned their heads, curiosity evident in their eyes. But the Collins family had one purpose: to defend Jaden. Upon entering the meeting room, they found Mrs. Blake sitting behind her desk, her demeanor cold and detached. "Good afternoon, Mr. and Mrs. Collins. It's a pleasure to meet you today," she greeted them in a polite but distant tone. Mr. Collins wasted no time, his voice calm but firm. "We're here to discuss Jaden's experience during career day." Mrs. Blake crossed her arms defensively, her expression guarded. "Yes, I assume you're referring to Jaden's claims about his father's job?" She replied, her tone somewhat dismissive. Children at this age often make up stories to impress their friends. I simply wanted to maintain focus on reality. Mr. Collins felt a surge of anger rising within him, but he remained composed. "Let me show you something," he said, reaching into his briefcase. He pulled out his shiny FBI badge and placed it on the table in front of her. The sound of metal hitting the desk echoed in the room, drawing Mrs. Blake's attention. Her eyes widened in shock as she realized the gravity of the situation. "This is my badge," Mr. Collins continued, his voice steady. "I'm Special Agent Collins, a senior agent with the FBI leading national counterterrorism operations. I want you to look at this and tell me if you still think Jaden is lying." Mrs. Blake's composure faltered as she picked up the badge, her hands trembling. "I didn't expect," she stammered, struggling to find her words. Mr. Collins cut her off, his tone firm. "You thought a black child couldn't possibly have a father with such a respectable job, didn't you?" The weight of his accusation hung heavily in the air, but for the first time, Mrs. Blake appeared genuinely shaken. "I didn't mean that," she began, but her voice trailed off, unable to defend herself. Mr. Collins stood tall, his presence commanding. "I'm here to remind you that no one, not even you, has the right to judge my son or anyone else based on your prejudices and ignorance." Mrs. Collins joined her husband, her voice icy as she spoke. "We hope you find a way to correct your mistake, not for us, but for Jaden and for the other children who learn to respect the truth." With that, they left the meeting room, leaving Mrs. Blake to grapple with the consequences of her actions. In the following days, Jaden remained unaware of the confrontation that had taken place on his behalf. He continued to navigate the hallways of Willow Creek Elementary, facing the whispers and laughter that followed him like shadows. But his parents' determination to stand up for him planted a seed of hope within him, a flicker of light in the darkness of his struggles. Finally, the moment arrived that would change everything. Mrs. Blake called the class to order, her demeanor markedly different from before. "Before we begin today's lesson, I have something important to address regarding career day," she announced, her voice trembling slightly. Jaden's heart raced as he listened closely, unsure of what to expect. "I want to apologize to Jaden," Mrs. Blake continued, her gaze finally meeting his. "I reacted thoughtlessly and inappropriately. I was wrong not to believe him, and I hurt him by calling him a liar in front of the whole class. That was a serious mistake." Jaden felt a mix of surprise and relief wash over him. The classroom fell silent, all eyes on him as Mrs. Blake expressed her regret. It was a moment he had longed for, a glimmer of validation in a sea of doubt. But the real turning point came when Mr. Collins entered the room, his presence commanding attention once again. "Hello, everyone. I'm Jaden's father, Special Agent Collins from the FBI," he introduced himself, his voice strong and clear. "I'm here not just for my son, but to remind all of you of something very important. Truth must always be respected, and you should never mock or belittle someone due to ignorance." Jaden watched as the class absorbed his father's words, their expressions shifting from surprise to understanding. Mr. Collins continued, emphasizing the importance of respect and acceptance, highlighting the dangers of prejudice. In that moment, Jaden felt a weight lift off his shoulders, his heart swelling with pride as he realized that his father was fighting for him in a way he had never expected. As the lesson continued, Jaden's classmates began to see him in a new light. They recognized the strength of his character and the courage it took to stand up for the truth. For the first time, he felt a sense of belonging. The laughter that once mocked him now transformed into applause for the truth he had bravely shared. In the days that followed the confrontation with Mrs. Blake, Jaden began to notice a change in the atmosphere at school. The whispers and mocking glances that had once plagued him slowly began to fade. His classmates, now aware of the truth about his father, were starting to treat him with newfound respect. The shift was subtle but significant. Friendly smiles replaced hostile stares, and Jaden felt a sense of relief wash over him. One afternoon, as the bell rang and students filed out of class, Jaden found himself approached by Colin. The tall blonde boy, who had once been the source of so much pain, now stood before him with an uncertain expression. "Hey, Jaden," Colin began hesitantly. "Can we talk for a minute?" Jaden was taken aback but nodded, curious about what Colin had to say. "I just wanted to apologize," Colin said, his voice sincere. "The things I said and did before were terrible. I was wrong, and I feel really ashamed for that. I hope you can forgive me." Jaden was initially stunned, but he could see the sincerity in Colin's eyes. A warm sense of relief began to blossom in his chest. "Thank you, Colin. I accept your apology," he replied, a genuine smile breaking through. "Great. So, do you want to work on the upcoming science project together?" "I think we'd make a great team," Colin suggested, his enthusiasm palpable. Jaden felt a thrill of excitement at the prospect of collaboration. "Sure, I'd love to," he replied, feeling a sense of camaraderie that had been absent before. As they began to work together, Jaden found that the walls he had built around himself were slowly coming down. Colin was friendly and engaging, and their conversations flowed easily. Jaden realized that he was no longer just the FBI boy, but rather a valued member of the class. The other students began to seek him out as well, eager to hear about his father's work and to learn from him. With the encouragement of his classmates, Jaden decided to take the lead in forming an after-school club focused on crime-solving and law enforcement. He envisioned a place where students could come together to learn about justice, teamwork, and the importance of integrity. Excited by the idea, Jaden approached Mrs. Blake, who was more than willing to support him in establishing the club. "We could call it FBI Junior," Jaden suggested enthusiastically. "We can learn about real-life crime-solving and develop our logical thinking skills." Mrs. Blake's eyes lit up with approval. "That sounds fantastic, Jaden. I'd be happy to help you get it started," she replied, her tone warm and encouraging. As the club took shape, Jaden felt a surge of confidence. He began to lead the group, guiding his classmates through activities that involved analyzing evidence and solving mock cases. The excitement in the room was palpable as they delved into discussions, each child eager to contribute and learn. Jaden's natural leadership shone through as he encouraged everyone to participate, fostering an environment of teamwork and respect. One afternoon, after successfully solving a case involving a missing item, Colin approached Jaden, excitement evident in his voice. "You're really good at this, Jaden. I didn't know crime solving could be so much fun." Jaden beamed at the compliment, feeling a sense of pride swell within him. He had transformed from the boy who had been ridiculed to a respected leader, guiding his peers through challenges. As the weeks passed, the FBI Junior Club became a highlight of Willow Creek School, drawing in more participants eager to learn. Jaden's classmates began to appreciate him not only for his father's profession, but also for his intelligence, kindness, and integrity. Even Mrs. Blake's attitude shifted. She now treated Jaden with respect and admiration, acknowledging his contributions to the class and the club. One evening, sitting with his parents in the living room, Jaden shared the success of the club with them. "Dad, guess what? Colin apologized to me today, and now we're partners on the science project." His father smiled proudly, placing a strong hand on Jaden's shoulder. "See, sometimes all it takes is a little courage and trust for everything to change." "I'm proud of you for staying strong through all of this." Jaden felt a sense of security and happiness that he thought he might never find again. He had not only regained his lost dignity, but had also grown stronger from the painful experiences he had endured. He understood that facing challenges head-on had transformed him into a more confident individual, capable of inspiring others to rise above their prejudices and fears. As the school year continued, Jaden's journey of personal growth and resilience became a source of inspiration for his classmates. They learned from his experiences, recognizing the importance of acceptance and understanding. Jaden had not only found his place among his peers, but had also helped them recognize the value of truth and respect. In the heart of Willow Creek School, a sense of community began to blossom, rooted in the lessons learned from Jaden's courage and the bonds formed through shared experiences. As summer approached, the graduation ceremony at Willow Creek Elementary School arrived, and the atmosphere buzzed with excitement and anticipation. Jaden sat quietly in his seat, anxiously waiting for his turn to speak. The sun shone brightly outside, casting a warm glow over the rows of students, parents, and teachers gathered to celebrate the achievements of the year. Mrs. Blake stood up to introduce the student who would represent their class with a speech. Her voice was soft, yet filled with sincerity as she began, "Today, we have a very special speaker, one from whom I have learned so much. Please welcome Jaden Collins." The applause erupted as Jaden stood, feeling a wave of nervousness wash over him. With each step towards the podium, Jaden felt the support of his classmates and the love of his parents behind him. He looked down at the sea of familiar faces, their expressions filled with pride and encouragement. Taking a deep breath, he steadied himself and began, "Good afternoon to all the teachers, students, and parents present here today." His voice resonated through the space, and he paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "When I first came to this school, I faced many challenges. I was doubted and looked down upon simply because I shared the truth about my dad's job. I was called a liar, and I thought I would never regain my confidence and pride." The crowd listened attentively, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Jaden continued, "But it was the courage to stand up for the truth and the support from my family that helped me push through it all. I learned that prejudice and discrimination are some of the worst things that can hurt others. However, I also discovered that each of us can change and become better if we are brave enough to admit our mistakes and learn from them." As he spoke, Jaden's gaze met Collins, who sat in the front row, beaming with encouragement. "I want to give a special thank you to Mrs. Blake and all my classmates. It is because of the challenges we have faced together that we have all grown. I've learned the greatest lesson of my life. Never be afraid when you're different, and never let anyone judge you for that difference." Applause erupted once more, louder and more heartfelt than before. Jaden took a deep breath, feeling a surge of confidence. "And today, I want to say once again to everyone, my dad is an FBI agent. I'm proud of him, and I'm proud of myself. Never let anyone judge you just because you're different." The schoolyard filled with cheers and applause, and for the first time in a long while, Jaden felt an overwhelming sense of acceptance and belonging. As he stepped down from the podium, he was immediately surrounded by friends who rushed to congratulate him, wrapping him in warm hugs. Colin slung his arm around Jaden, laughing with pride. "You were amazing, Jaden." Mrs. Blake stepped forward, placing her hand gently on Jaden's shoulder. Her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you, Jaden, for teaching us so much. You've made us all better." In that moment, Jaden felt the weight of his struggles lift, replaced by a sense of accomplishment and community. His father, Mr. Collins, stepped forward, enveloping Jaden in a strong embrace. "Son, I've never been prouder of you than I am right now. You didn't just stand up for yourself, you stood up for everyone who has faced prejudice." Jaden smiled softly, feeling the warmth of his father's love and support. As the ceremony came to a close, Jaden realized that the road ahead would still have its challenges, but he was no longer afraid. He had learned how to stand strong, to defend the truth, and to believe in himself. The journey he had embarked upon had transformed him into a confident leader, ready to face whatever life threw his way. Willow Creek Elementary School had not just hosted a graduation ceremony. It had witnessed a powerful lesson in courage, growth, and the importance of truth. Jaden's story resonated in the hearts of all who had gathered, a reminder that every person is valuable and deserving of respect, and that no one, has the right to judge another based on their differences. As the sun set on that unforgettable day, Jaden knew he had not only found his place in the world, but had also helped others recognize the best values within themselves.